wanted to do a long one. I wanted to test my strength right there. Good morning, Grinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper. You could at Blender HG. I can't even do the intro. I don't know. It threw me off. The long good morning threw me off. Right? It's Tuesday, June 20th. Right? We know that. Right? I know that at least. Welcome to the show. Right? You get muscle memory of like what you do in the beginning. It's like, oh, I know. Blah, blah. You almost don't even have to think about it. But then once you like stray away from what you do, and then it's like, I completely forgot what I say in the beginning of shows. Right? But good morning. We got the YouTube chat going, the early birds. Even though Steve didn't put up the live stream until like 6 minutes before, whatever. But you found it, right? We got the regulars here. We got Bart B, we got Wataz, we got Brian C, we got Jay Simmons, Alex Santi, Discounts TV. Does he have a good deal on a television? Maybe he got 2 thumbs up. Hit that thummy thumbs. Hit the thummy thumbs. Remember, we got free content here. The way that you pay for it is with your thummy thumbs. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Obviously, on the shows during the week, I answer your questions. Right? If I could find the banner in here, there we go. Where is it? Yeah, there on the bottom. Right. So submit your questions. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. You send them in, I answer them. Obviously, I answer the YouTube chat and everything like that. But if you're not here, there are plenty of people that listen on the podcast feed, which you get on iTunes or anywhere you get your podcasts. So I see there's tons of downloads there that, they listen whenever, right? Later in the day, a week from now, who knows, right? This show is mostly evergreen content. So a lot of times people can't show up at 11 o'clock in the morning, right? They can't. But they still want their questions asked. They want their questions answered. So go. Email them in. Questions at theoryofdfs.com, even if we've covered it before, right? We got to the point, right? Got to the point where, yeah, I know I'm going to repeat myself again, but sometimes people want the reiteration of the concepts. Especially if you want structured learning, the best way is to go and get the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. 15-hour audio DFS Masterclass, as well as the Advanced Player's Guide with custom Excel tools. Get them both, theoryofdfs.com. Today is just a mailbag day. I'm just going to clean out the inbox, okay? You want to see what we got? Want to see what we got in the inbox? I'm not sure. I may be answering the same things over and over again, but who cares? It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Let's see. David, we're talking about the sim tool. I mean, this is a question. I don't know how best I could like help or answer exactly, but he says I have it on my other screen. Just that's why I'm looking over on this side. Right. Samuel B says I don't think there are any new questions that can be asked about the DFS. Well, I don't think it's necessarily new questions. I mean, there are plenty of people. The purpose of this show is unstructured learning. So, I mean, I've been playing DFS for, it's going to be in October, 8 years. There are plenty of people that just started, only been playing the past year, only been playing once in a while. They've been playing for 5 years, but just off and on and every so often and whatever, right? They may not have found RotoGrinders yet. They're right. This is their first interaction, or maybe they just signed up for RotoGrinders Premium, right? They're taking a look at Lineup HQ. They're taking a look at the projections or content and everything. They may not know. They may not know, or at least be highly familiar with a lot of concepts. I mean, come on, and go on Twitter, right? Go in the community. There's still plenty of people that don't know basic statistics. I mean, most people. Now, the people that watch this show, the regulars, I mean, we all know this, right? I'm not saying anything that is new, right? When we discuss mathematical concepts that you could have learned in high school or middle school. It's not like complex stuff. Sometimes we do talk about a little bit more complicated stuff. Yesterday we talked about, that James is running and putting together sims and contest fields and trying to do some vector analysis. Like, dude, do you have to do that? No. Still interesting. Still puts you in the mindset of the thought process of what could go wrong. Like, what does this thing do, right? And what is the output, and how do I interpret that output based on the methodology? That's why you will see scientists, right? Scientists, when a study comes out. So some study, this would be a tip if you just read headlines on news stories, okay? Some media literacy. When you see a headline, 1 in 5 people, make love to reptiles. There's some nonsense type of headline. 1 in 5 or something. 1 in 5 people have sex with reptiles, right? That can't be true, right? Well, based on, it'll say study. Study 1 in 5, would like to have a sexual experience with reptiles or something. And then you look at the actual study, and that's not really what it says. That's not really what it says, right? Either it means something different, right? That has nothing to do with sexual relations or anything like that. It could be a study that analyzed the sexual response of a group of people, and they showed pictures of different things that could stimulate you. And it turns out that 1 in 5 people during the course of, here's something that stimulates you, something that shouldn't stimulate you, something that should, something that shouldn't, that 1 in 5 people still are stimulated in the course of that study by some lizard or snake on the street or something. And then it's like, okay, we're going to take that because that's like sensationalized, and it's like 1 in 5 people want to have sex with a reptile. Like that's actually not what the study says. And then you have to look at the methodology. It's like, oh, we tested this on 20 people, right? On just a total of 20 people with that, not even a representative sample size. So completely sex-crazed people, right? Nymphomaniacs, 20 nymphomaniacs, and 1 out of 5 still had a sexual response for a reptile. But you look at the headline and you go, wow, 1 out of 5 people. Like, what's the methodology of the study? Understanding the methodology, you go, oh, whoa. This conclusion, right? The 1 in 5 may be technically correct, but that's not really what it means. So it's very similar in DFS when you see simulation outputs, right? I mean, even stuff like, what's the best play? Like, well, that's in a vacuum. Like, oh, this is the best point per dollar play. What does that mean? That means his mean projection for his salary is the highest on the slate, or is very high on the slate. Does that mean he's the best play? What does that term mean? Many people think best play means this guy's going to do well, and that's not what best play means, right? People try to make it out that that's what it means. Yeah, he's the most probability of hitting his median compared to other people's median. That's really what it means. But people don't look past that. That's the point of this show, to understand the context of these things. And then even if he was the, quote, best play, that doesn't necessarily mean you could make the best lineup, the highest EV lineups with that guy, because he's owned 74% or something, something like that. So it's not just one thing. So you see, here are the best plays of the day here's the 5 best plays of the day. And you go, okay, I'm going to take all 5 plays and put it into my lineup. And why aren't I winning 100,000 first place? So yeah, well, all five guys are like 25+% owned because they obviously project the best for their salary, median wise. And then once you start factoring correlation and leverage, then maybe you shouldn't be playing all 5 players in the lineup in the specific contest that you're playing. So in and of itself, the headline, here are the best plays. Like that in and of itself, that doesn't mean what you think it means. So I try to train people to think better, right? Not, oh, here are all the answers for this specific slate. Well, they're going to change. You don't have a time machine. There's a ton of variance. So how do you think about games? Not just DFS, just think about games in general. Understanding the concepts of game theory so you can apply them in whatever way you want, in any game, any sport on DFS, any format, and go, okay, what are the contextual variables that involve small slates, large slates, different projection differences and everything. So you could bluntly look and go, this theoretically, from a conceptual standpoint, makes sense to build lineups like this. they would have a higher expected value than lineups like that. That's just going through the steps, understanding basic statistics, basic mathematical concepts, and then using logic to go through the steps of going, well, what's the flaw here? What could be overrepresented there based on your methodology? We always talk about blunt methodologies and precise methodologies. So what James was talking about yesterday was a more precise methodology on seed lineup creation, creating the field lineups that are going to be represented in a specific contest. So like David asks, where he kind of says that would a tool like that, with a process like that, be most useful for late swapping in NFL or late swapping in general, I guess? So being able to actually have the lineups at 1 p.m. So like we picture an NFL Sunday Classic slate where 1 p.m. Eastern, probably you get like 9 games that go, and then at 4 o'clock you get like 4 games or 5 games or however they split it. Sometimes 8 and 5, sometimes it's 7 and 4, whatever, depending on the bye weeks. But it's 2 very distinct times. Obviously, afternoon, you get like 4:05, 4:05, 4:25, 4:25. But for the most part, all the other games start at 1. And then by around like 3:30, like you kind of get a sense, you kind of know what the players are going to score. And you also have all the ownership, and you also have all the lineups except for the empty spots. So you can add up the salaries and kind of semi-predict what are going to be in, in your opponent's lineups. So that's why he says being able to have the actual lineups at 1 p.m. and having the actual ownerships and the salaries remaining for the field, it would then provide the data to adjust the late game's projected ownership with very strong accuracy, as well as distributing that ownership into representative actual lineups and combos. And that's where he feels that you really get some edge via late swap. And he's just basically asking that, does this make any sense? And do you know if top players that, do a lot of programming are doing this type of thing? And I can tell you, yes, to some degree. Plenty of top players utilize late swap like for their own lineups, but I don't know if they're necessarily simming, taking the actuals and then simming with their own lineups, and then kind of like having them guess what the other lineups and fill them out for the ownership, and then coming across, and then what would would their current lineups like ROI look like currently with who they currently have in their slots, and then what would be better lineups to play that would be higher ROI based on what we already know. Like you can you can do that. I don't know how long that takes. I mean, because obviously when we're talking about late swap, there's much smaller time windows. So doing it accurately, or more accurately than obviously pre-contest, pre-lock, is going to go up because we have more information. I mean, that's just basic logic. The more information we have, the more accurate we can be. But from a speed perspective, are you going to be able to run all of that as well as being accurate on the simulated ROI? I mean, I'm sure you can, but I mean, you need the programming chops to do so. I think that's something Nerdy Tender could talk about. I'm assuming he could build something like that. That would run at like a mile a minute or something. But yes, but in conceptually, David, that would be correct. I mean, but imagine doing that in a sport like basketball, where, I mean, the games are all staggered out. And a guy at halftime could have a, snowflake with 16 points. And by the end of the game have 64. So like, it's not necessarily, they had a bad first half, but, they could have a ceiling result, and vice versa. We've seen plenty of times. Joel Embiid, 38.5 points, 42.5 points at the half. And then he ends with like 54. And it's like, okay, well, I expected more than that. Obviously, you could simulate, outcomes based on what you currently have for their score and how much time is left in the game. But now we're adding even more complexity. But yes, theoretically, conceptually, there would be an edge in this. Yes. I mean, it's the edge that you try. I mean, dude, it's the edge that you try to do in late swap, bluntly, without running anything, without running any computer programming. Right? You look at your lineups and say, oh, I got like the nut stack and the nut early running back. So I'm just going to swap to the highest projected running back in defense or whatever in my slots and block people. Then vice versa. Oh, I don't have the 42-point wide receiver. So now what do I do? Right? To me, it's the same concept that you're doing You're doing it bluntly yourself, manually. This would make it much more accurate, right? Much more precise. So that's really just the scope of what you're doing. Okay, going through the YouTube chat. If you got any questions, feel free. This is, the mailbag, anything goes type episode. Send them in. Send them in your questions. Send them in. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. We got some Grinders lives this week. Tomorrow, the show will be preempted. I'll be on with Dean for we have a decent sized early slate for MLB. Thursday, I think there's a 4-game early slate. So either there'll be a Grinders live, or maybe we'll just build lineups on this show if we have it. Then Friday is MMA. So next week I'm gonna need some questions in the queue. Send them in. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. Brian C asks in the chat, in general, when is a good time to use the OIS button when constructing lineups? Thanks. Obviously, all the settings in Lineup HQ are just what types of lineups do you want to build, and whatever settings you need to do to get that to happen, do, right? So we have this OIS button only in stacks. Typically, obviously in MLB, stacking helps raise the better. I don't know how to word it so it's not technically wrong, but stacking correlation increases the variance of your lineup. And the more and more you stack, the more that the outcomes, like we have a distribution of outcomes, right? Like this is like, maybe it's not in baseball, it's not a bell curve, but let's just say it's a normal distribution. Like the more and more players from the same team that you put in the lineup, the more and more everyone's outcomes are correlated to each other, right? I mean, is what correlation is. So when there's a low like a crappy hitter, a crappy 8th hitter, right, on a team that hits maybe 2 or 3 home runs a year, right, doesn't do much, catcher, right, some good fielding catcher that ain't that great of a hitter, like on his own has an outcome with a median projection of, let's say, 5. But when combined with 4 other players, like if these 4 other players do well, if any one of the other 4 players do well, it's more likely, the probability goes up that garbage catcher, that garbage other player does well also, because the team, they're scoring 8 runs, 10 runs, 12 runs. He's getting an extra plate appearance. Instead of getting 3 plate appearances, he gets 5 plate appearances. Okay? But he's crappy, right? So his individual plate appearances aren't as valuable as, the best hitter on the team's plate appearances. Right? It's much different from, Mike Trout's paid plate appearances and some, the guy at the bottom of the order, right? The crappy guy, right? But the better that Trout does, the more plate appearances the other guy gets, the more players on base there are, right? So his plate appearances become much more valuable. A plate appearance is so much more valuable with the bases loaded than it is with no one on base, right? So correlation, in theory, helps the crappy people more than the good people, right? Shohei Ohtani could hit 2 home runs, and the Angels, that's the only 2 home runs, the only 2 runs they score that entire game, right? Right? That could happen. And obviously someone like Shohei Ohtani is much more likely to do that than garbage guy at the bottom of the order or whatever in the lineup. Okay? So as a one-off, like Ohtani is a one-off, sure. I mean, he could be the one that has 32 points on the team and no one else does crap. So whoever has a stack didn't get there, doesn't win. You still need Ohtani. It's much less likely that whatever. I mean, if we use an example from today, I mean, let's go to the Angels. I'm talking about the Angels. Why not? Right? If we look at the projected order, I mean, it's against Kershaw, so I don't know if you Andrew Velasquez at 2,200. Like, it's less likely you're playing them as a one-off, right? He benefits much more from the Angels overall doing well than him individually doing well, which is going to be much less probabilistic than Ohtani or Trout, or even guys like Ward and Drury and Renfroe. So the crappier guys benefit from correlation much more than the good players. So when you're thinking about like only in stacks, it's like if you're building like 5-man stacks with 3 one-offs, you're building and you have one-offs. I mean, if you're building a 5-3 lineup, then OAS doesn't even matter, right? If you're building 4-3-1, then it does, right? Building anything with one-offs, OIS is going to matter. So because I'm not saying that it's quite possible that Andrew Velasquez is a one-off is in the winning lineup. It is possible. Even with 11 points, it's still possible. It's just less likely. So if you want to remove some lineups that have those probabilities versus lineups that have more, the guy that does well on the team is the only guy that does well on the team, it's much more likely to be Ohtani or Trout than it is to be Velasquez. Angels win 2-0 and Velasquez has double 2 home runs. It's much less likely than Ohtani and Trout both hitting home runs. And the Angels stack in and of itself doesn't get there. So that's why the only in stacks I could see going, okay, I'm building a bunch of Angels lineups, but I don't want like Wallach, Stefanik, Rengifo, and Velasquez only in stacks. So I keep them in my player pool. Now, obviously, if you don't want to play, if you're not playing Angel stacks and you don't want to play these guys at all, just X them out. Just, exclude them. But this would be a way to only in stack. I only want this in stacks. I don't want Michael Stefanik as a one-off in some random lineup. I don't mind him in Angel stacks. If I'm building 5-man Angel stacks, go for it. Have fun. But if I have one-offs of Angels, similar concept. The same thing could be said for like high-owned players in stacks, right? There may be if we look at like ownership, just a car. I mean, this is obviously a little bit spread out. A lot of people are going to be playing Joey Votto, right, at first base as a one-off or something. Maybe you're building red stacks, but you don't want to have, let's say Votto. I mean, I know it says 14% here, but let's say just for example's sake, he's going to be like 28% owned. And you're like, well, he's going to be 28% owned. Do I want the most popular player on the slate as a one-off because that's going to look that he's going to be in a lot of other stacked lineups? Or do you want him just in stacks, which reduces the amount of combinations that you'd be competing with, right? So let's say you do Votto and maybe the Reds are individually are too high on, like Jose Ramirez for Cleveland, right? 5,200 third baseman. And you go, well, there's going to be a lot of lineups. If you play red stacks, if you play Texas stacks, if you play with like it's very easy to fit in Jose Ramirez. I'm just making an example. So there's going to be a lot more combinations of Jose Ramirez in general in your contest that are related to other stacks as well as Cleveland stacks. There are much less Cleveland stacks, though. So you're like, well, I'm deciding on what lineups to play. You could still play plenty of plus EV lineups that have a one-off Jose Ramirez. But there are probably more lineups that don't have a one-off Jose Ramirez that are higher expected value. Probably. So that would be another instance where you'd be using this only in stacks button, if you so choose. You may not have a problem, dude. You may be off. So you never have to worry about the OIS button. It's like, okay, well, it didn't happen anyway. That's why looking at your lineups is very important and not just going by these exposure numbers. Build your 100 lineups, right, and go. Let's take a look at the Angels. Do I have any of Velasquez one-offs? Do I have any Chad Wallach one-offs? And then you can remove those lineups. Or if you're getting too much of it, then go, I'm going to redo 100. I'm going to rebuild 100 lineups and have I see that I'm getting way too much one off this guy. And you go, okay, well, I'm just going to click on OIS, and now that's done. Don't have to worry about it. Now, anytime that I get that guy in a lineup, he goes from being in 30% of your lineups to being in 8% of your lineups. And in the 8% of lineups that he's in a stack with his own team, right? Very simple. You don't have to change exposure numbers or anything. You just have to press the button, and he automatically starts coming out of lineups where, he projects well enough to be in that positional spot. So it's a way to do that. Much easier than like building groups. Because you used to be able to do it if you do build groups, but you have to build like 9 groups for a team in order to do it. Let's see. Anything else in the YouTube chat? Discounts TV. Probably pitching some TVs. Do I need to get a new TV? No, I'm good with my TVs. Mr. Discounts TV. Trying to get more serious about DFS. Been watching your content for a while. Recently won the $5 single entry tournament, but never know each day if I should go heavier in cash or tournament lineups. It depends on how much edge do you think there is. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. Put your money where the edges are. If you believe on this slate that, I know what a lot of people are going to be playing in double ups. And I think my 3v3 or 4v4 is significantly enough better than that, then obviously you think you have more of an edge in the cash games, then play more edge in the cash games. If you say it's like, yeah, what most people are going to play is what I would play, then what edge do you have there? Everyone's paying the rake. Same thing for tournaments. You may be running your lineups. You're going through aggregating projections, looking, changing ownership and everything. And you may look and you go, yeah, this slate, this pitcher is going to be like 30% owned, and he like shows up at like 2% of my lineups. So either my stuff is off too much, or there's an edge here. I want to play the slates where my lineups that I believe are high expected value are significantly more different than what the field is going to do. And what do you do when you think you have a bigger edge? You put more money. That's the Kelly criteria. Can you compute exactly what your edge is? Not in DFS, you can't. Way too complicated. Way too many variables, and they all are variant to a high degree. But it's the same thing as like flipping a coin, right? You're walking around town and you find some coin flippers, right? You go to a coin flipper, it's like, oh, yeah. You can bet on this coin flip, but you're going to have to lay 125. It's like, hell no, it's 50-50. It should be plus 100, right? So you move on. Then you find someone that's like, oh, I'll give you plus 110 on a coin flip. It's like, oh, okay. That's profitable. I got an edge there. And then maybe 2 streets down, there's a guy that's doing plus 350 on a coin flip. You know what I'm doing? I'm not doing the plus 110. I'm taking my money and going over the plus 350 guy on a coin flip. And he's like, well, how many times you want to do it? I'm like, what's your limit, buddy? What's your limit, right? You find where your edges are on that given day, given slate, anything. And you put more money in the higher edge spots and less of your money in the lower edge spots. That's not just in DFS. That's in sports betting. That's in anything. Me personally, I have a percentage that I play on the limit I would play on a daily basis. And that will change depending on sport and depending on NFL Sundays. My percentage of bankroll played is significantly higher than on a random Tuesday in MLB, in baseball. But that doesn't just include DFS. That includes props. That includes betting. That includes anything. So there are a lot of days, there have been a lot of days the past year, especially this year, where I look and 90% plus, sometimes 100. There are some days where I put all my money down on props. There's enough there's enough props out there that are high enough edge for me that, well, I've exhausted my allocation for the day and I don't play DFS. DFS has a lower edge than those prop bets. And then I just don't play. That's fine. Prop bets are easy. Probably most of the time that's done in the morning. Maybe in the afternoon. I already got, you wake up in the morning and I see, it's like, oh, there's like 7 or 8 spots that are really good. There's like 1 or 2 that are like great. And then there's a whole bunch that are really good. And then maybe 1 or 2 that are pretty good. And then you're like, okay, well, I'm doing Prize Picks Underdog and I'm doing, round robining, everything like that. And next thing you know, I have like 3-4 grand in play on all those props. And I'm like, okay, well, there's no DFS today. I mean, I could, but it'll only be a very small percentage. Yeah, I'll play the 121 or something. I'll whatever. Sometimes I just don't, only because it's at a different time. It's like the type of thing is like I already got 4 grand down on props. Like I'm done for the day. Like I could just not even pay attention. Like I literally will just not pay attention. I mean, there's a lot of times that's what I do on Wednesdays, right? Wednesdays I watch AW Dynamite at night, and I don't even want to be distracted. Me and my wife, we watch wrestling. That's what we do. That's our time together. So I'm not even distracted by what's going on in MLB or in NBA or anything that's going on that day. So you know what? Those days, that's I got prop bets. I got that stuff. On a Sunday, NFL, maybe I already got I got a decent amount of prop bet action in on Tuesday or something. But since I'm going to be since there's a much bigger edge in NFL contests because of how much casual participation there is in comparison to other sports, my bankroll possessions just goes up. And then intermixed into, granular into like, do I play cash games? Do I play this? That percentage will change on a week-to-week basis. Sometimes it comes down to time. Sometimes, on FanDuel, I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to play one lineup in a bunch of, 50-50s and head-to-heads or whatever. Just, I don't think I'm going to have the time to allocate on Sunday morning to do everything well. So I'm just going to play the aggregate optimal on FanDuel and be done with it. I mean, I could do that 5 minutes before lock with one button. Done. I don't have to be rushing to have to make, 150 lineups here and 150 lineups there and 20 lineups here. But then on every day, I allocate what I'm going to do. So I am conservative with my bankroll. It's not a matter of like, well, 10,000 today and 500 tomorrow and 2,500 today. Like it's all a percentage. So it's like, if I were to play today, right? Typically my max at this point in MLB is 4,000. And typically 4,000, I would never play 4,000 in just DFS. But 4,000 as far as props or whatever you're concerned on a given day. NFL, that could be 10,000. Right? And a lot of times I don't even hit the 4,000 in MLB. That would be the max for me. And then as I build my bankroll, then that goes up to 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. Is it a little bit more conservative than most people? Yes, it is. Maybe I am leaving money on the table by not, instead of doing some like quarter Kelly type of concept, should be doing a half Kelly type of, range. Maybe I could do it, but I mean, obviously, the higher percentage, the more I'm adding to my risk of ruin. In my stage of my life at 44 years old, I care more about that than making all the money. Can I do this in a way where I can live as I'm living currently forever? And it's like, yes, okay, then do it that way. Then I'll do it that way. I don't need all the money. It's fine. Brian C. asks, okay, that's a joke question about sexually excited by reptiles. Right, stacking gives you a better percentage chance of hitting a top lineup than nailing 8 one-offs. Yes, that's correct. It's much harder to do than the 8 perfect one-offs. That will be the optimal lineup, but you won't even need that. Like that, if you take a look on an MLB slate, like what's the optimal? What's the best possible combination of players based on their salary and their score and their position? You'll see a lineup in baseball that's 310, and it's 8 one-offs and 2 pitchers, and both of them are one's 3% and one's 1%, and some of the batters are 2%, and you go, okay, this lineup scored 310 with 8 one-offs. What was the winning lineup of the large field GPP? It's like 240. Like the 70 points that you didn't need. Like, so you're not aiming for the optimal lineup like that. You don't need that. Right? If there was like 50 million people in the contest, maybe you would need that. You need something closer to that, but not even in the milli maker in NFL do you need, the nuts. Like the lineup that wins the milli maker is nowhere near the nuts in NFL. I mean, it's nowhere near it. Tons of points off. Now, sometimes when a lot of the chalk hits, then you're much closer to the nuts, but you don't need anywhere near that. That's why we're stacking. It's easier. You don't need those extra 70 points. DFix asks, what metric can you use to select a pool of one-offs? Ceiling? Well, I don't. I assume meaning projection is not ideal. It often include guys that rarely go for the 15, 20 you often need. Well, that's also not taking into account that when we said Andrew Velasquez before, maybe in order to get all the expensive hitters and the 2 expensive pitchers in, Andrew Velasquez at shortstop with 3 points, that's the only way to do it because he's 2,200. So you can't just think of one side of like, well, if Andrew Velasquez only scores 3 points, he's not going to be, you're not going to win the GPP. It's like, well, what happens if all the expensive hitters do well? What happens if the expensive stack of all 5K batters, they put up 16 runs, right? The Dodgers put up 16 runs with the top 5 hitters. And a 10K pitcher puts up 45 points, and a 9K pitcher puts up 40 points. Like dude, you could win with the Andrew Velasquez one-off. There are instances of that. So I don't necessarily. Me personally, I only use the OAS button when I look in lineups and I go, this guy's showing up way too much as a one-off. It's more of a diversification tool. I'm going to automatically separate myself from the pack with the ownership version of that. These are things you can do once you're generating lineups. Remember, especially in MLB DFS, you could build 50,000 for today's slate. How many games is it? You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games. You can build 50,000 lineups that are good. That I would look at and go, yep, sounds good. Throw it in. But you're like, well, yeah, but I'm only playing 150, or I'm only playing 50, or I'm only playing 1. Well, at that point, it's just a matter of which lineups. Now it's just a diversification. It's a portfolio management issue. It's not which lineups are plus EV or not. As long as you're not building the bad lineups that are going to be in your contest, which typically is somewhere between 15 and 25% of lineups, your lineups are probably profitable in the long run. Realizing that profit, realizing that EV, well, good luck. Welcome to DFS. Like I do get questions like Jeremy Bratz emailed me. Like, I know your first response to most people that ask you the question, hey, I'm struggling with MLB DFS. Can you help me figure out what I'm doing wrong? Is watch all the pregame shows and by the theory of DFS, which is correct. At theoryofdfs.com. But I've watched and rewatched and purchased the courses. And I could just not be realizing my EV yet. But I'm just wondering if you had any questions for me to troubleshoot what I could be lacking in case it's something bigger than I'm missing. I think the thing that you're missing is the word could in the sentence of I could just not be realizing my EV yet. I've said this multiple times on the show. I'm gonna say a definitive thing. Like based on who's in, I mean, I would say 90% of people watching the show currently still have not grasped how much variance there is in DFS. Oh, yeah, I know variance. It's like, no, you've not grasped how much variance there. You can play the top 150 ROI lineups. If we could simulate this out accurately with the projections and everything, you could play the top 150 ROI lineups every day and not win probably for 5 or 6 years with 150 lineups. Now let's say, well, I'm only playing 20 lineups. I'm only playing 25 lineups. Well, that's 6 times less. So it's quite possible. It's not quite possible. It's actually within the realm of one standard deviation outcomes that you play 25 lineups that are highly plus EV every day for MLB right now, every day, and don't win first place for 20 years. That's not, if that happened, that wouldn't be considered uncommon. Now, is it less common? Yes. You're experiencing a significant level of negative variance. But is it, oh my God, I must be the most cursed person in the world? No. It's within an expected range of outcomes, within one standard deviation. It's part of that big bulk there. Right? And we're talking about large field content. We're talking about a 20,000 plus person contest, entry contest. Now, if that was happening in 1,000 entry contests and you were playing, 3 lineups, 5 lineups, then maybe after 5 years, you'd be like, maybe you may be doing something wrong. But you see the scopes of what I'm talking about? Right? An email like this, I mean, nothing against Jeremy or anything like that. It's like, okay, I started playing MLB this year. I started in April 1st, and now it is June 15th, right? So April, May, June. So let's just say there's 30 days in each month, then half a month. Let's say that's 70. They played 75 slates. It's like I played 75 slates and I have a minus 30% ROI. And I have, I came in 8th once or something like that. But it's like I'm not getting there. What am I doing wrong? The truthful response, which doesn't help anyone, is see me in 10 years. And I'll be able to tell you. But 75 slates is you're not even in the ballpark. I mean, you're not even in the ballpark. 75 slates is not a small sample size. It is actually an extremely absurdly small sample size. Okay? Like 75 slates is, come back to me when it's 750. And even then I'll say that's a pretty small sample size. 750 slates, that's like 3 to 4 years of playing every day in MLB. And even then, that 3 to 4 year sample size, I go, you're still not anywhere close within one standard deviation of your true ROI. And then I go, well, when will I be? I said, come back to me in maybe 30 or 40 years. Even then, at that point, you have a better shot of being within your true ROI. Now, if your ROI is like minus 90%, you must be doing something wrong. Just like if your ROI was 90%, it's like 190%. It's like that's called getting extremely lucky. But within these scopes of like minus 30 to plus 30% ROI, like, dude, I couldn't tell you if you're playing well or running bad for decades, just based on those statistics. That's how much variance there is. NFL, like people talk about NFL, does not include showdown. So like you're playing 18 classic slates. It's like, it's halfway through the season. I played 9 weeks of NFL. and I'm down like 50%. I'm down 60%. I'm seem to be conceptually doing what you're talking about. I look at the best players' lineups, the top players. I look at their set. They're building very similar lineups to me. What am I doing wrong? It's like you may not be doing nothing wrong. You're rolling a 5,000 sided die. You're guessing 492, and it's not coming. Like you're getting paid 20,000 to 1 on a 5,000 one-sided die. I'm guessing a 5,000 sided die. Then you're saying after 9 rolls, what am I doing wrong? It's like nothing. You're expected to lose 4,999 times. Like you're just getting paid 4 times the amount than you should because you're getting paid 20,000 to 1 for a 5,000 to 1 shot. So you're not doing anything wrong. You just have to play long enough to realize your EV. That's why you can't bet, half your bankroll on every roll because you'll be by the time when you do hit, you're gonna have a penny left. You're gonna have 2 cents left. You're not gonna profit enough. That's the point of that is the point of the Kelly criterion. That's the point of Kelly. When I say what am I doing wrong, it's like it sounds like it's like a joke answer, but it is the true answer. I wouldn't have no one would know. Come back to me in a decade. Right? As long as you're not like outlier, like if you played 75 slates and you have a minus 92% ROI, you're doing something wrong, right? Just like you played 75 slates and you have a 387% ROI, it's like you're not God. You're not the best DFS player in the history of the possible universe. It's like you're running absurdly hot with variance. Like that's not sustainable. But I'd say within that 30% plus or minus kind of area, like 2x the rake in either direction, right? Maybe even 1.5x the rake in either direction. 22.5 to up and down. That's where all the variance. Like, dude, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, right? Just looking at that on whether or not you're playing well or running good or anything like that. Once you start getting to the outliers, yeah, then you could be like, well, I played 300 MLB slates and I'm minus 62%. Yeah, you're probably doing something wrong to some extent. And I say probably, you may not be. You may not be. You're just over maybe 1 standard deviation. Maybe. It's still, depending on the if you're playing a large field contest, you're still not over. You're still not over still not within 1 standard deviation. Smaller field, it's it normalizes much quicker because obviously, if all things were equal and you're playing a single entry 500-man contest, that you should be coming in first place once every 500 times. Now, the variance of that may be like, maybe there'd be some stretches where you don't come in first for 1,500 times. But at least then that's only like 7 years of MLB rather than like 70, right? That's how much variance. Like, people like, oh, yeah, I understand. Like, no, you don't understand. You really don't understand how much variance there is in DFS. There's a lot of survivorship bias. There's a lot of people from 5 years ago that play DFS well, just as well as anyone else that is around on top now. But, they're playing 10% of their bankroll and they had negative variance, while to other people that played, I'm going to play 15-20% of my bankroll, and then they go on some hot streak. They're still playing well, but in a week they bank 3 contests in 1 week. Next thing you know, they have $1 million+ bankroll. The difference of the skill of those 2 sets is the same. One just benefited from positive variance quicker, and the other one, negative variance, and they just stopped playing. They said, I'm out of money, or it's not worth my time. That's how much it's absurd. It's so absurd. So absurd. Why do you think I do a lot of prop betting now? Like, the variance in prop betting is insanely smaller Poker, same thing. And dude, I used to play poker for a living. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of variance in poker, right? Someone hits a 2-outer on you, right? Like, so, someone makes their flush 5 times in a row, like stuff like that happens all the time. You go, oh, variance sucks. You play DFS and you're like, then you come back to poker and you be like, poker, wow, how low variance this is. Right? Because DFS is like 100 times higher. Alex Santi says, I haven't binked for 5 figures in a contest in nearly 3 years. I profit because game selection and bankroll management are skills. That's correct. DFix says, I understand it's a minuscule sample size, but just looking at what the relay winner Brorana Flex ran in all his lineups yesterday, all of his one-offs profile is more of the expensive guys with more ceiling games. Yes, that is more probable. That's very much what I said before with the OIS button. I'm more likely to be using the expensive hitters that, one swing in the back to get them double digits than guys that benefit more from correlation because it's harder for them to get there themselves. So theoretically, one-offs with expensive guys or power hitters or whatever, the better players are going to be a little bit better than ones that have like the 2K. The 2K crapper is the one-off. More probable. Doesn't mean better. It just means more probable. Right, Alex Santi even agrees with me. Far less variance in poker than DFS. So, far. Ridiculous. Ridiculously less. Right, DFix says, I trust my process and know I'm not building bad lineups. I'm just looking to make them 0.5% better. Yeah, sure. Maybe that's a way to do so. But now, once what you've gotten to your point, I've talked to you before on our coaching calls. You've gotten to the point where you're fine. Now you're just going to get diminishing returns. You're spending the time to improve your stuff by about X little bit, which is fine if you find it worthy to spend your time to do so. You can still be profitable even if you didn't. You may find a better use of your time. Maybe you don't and you want to. Maybe you just intellectually want to do it. That's fine also. But sometimes when I frame things in terms of like, you could look at these 84 different things, people are like, oh, I don't want to do all that. It's like, yeah, you don't have to, out of these 84 things, 80 of them, you don't worry about until you can do the other 4 things really well, because the other 4 things will take you 98% of the way there. And then the 80 other things get you the extra 2%. But a lot of people look at these little things and go, oh, what can I do here? And they just don't even get the central tenet of how to build good lineups or not build bad lineups. Defix says, I need more theory or wrestling episodes to find other ways to invest my time. Turns out a lot more DFS players, or at least my audience of DFS players, watch professional wrestling than I thought. There are tons that don't. I could tell, dude. I could tell on my Twitter feed there's tons that don't. Because I could post some wrestling stuff and then next thing you know, I look the next day and I've lost 12 followers. I get it. But I never used to tweet about wrestling because I'm like, oh, most people follow me for fantasy sports. And then I go, what do I care about those people? Like, dude, I'll tweet what I want to tweet. My account is me as a person. It's not like a topical thing, right? Yes. Yes. I developed my following at 17,000, whatever. Mostly from fantasy sports and DFS, yes. But I'm a person also, right? Alex says it right. Tweet however you want. Right? Okay, get your questions in. We got Grinders live tomorrow. Thursday, maybe, possibly. And Friday's MMA. So get your question. I need questions for next week. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. Send them in. I will answer them. You see, I've been nice. I was nice today. Some days I'm not nice, but today I was in a good mood, right? So send them in. We got. I'll be on with Dean. I think maybe 10:30 or 10:45. It's an early one. I think the lock is 12:10 tomorrow. So I'll be on. I may be on a little bit earlier with Dean, and Thursday, and maybe with Dean also. Obviously, the All-Star break will be coming up in July, and that'll be a nice week off, or at least Monday through Thursday off. So send in your questions at theoryofdfs.com. Hit the thummy thumbs. On your way out the door, smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, smash the notification bell to know when we go live. We got a big slate tonight. I think DK is running a Millie Maker. I think it's more expensive. Is it a more expensive Millie Maker? I don't know. I've not looked yet. So we'll be doing tons of content today on that slate on Grinders Live on Crunch Time. So tune into the channel and get all of the takes for tonight's slate in MLB. Sign up for RotoGrinders Premium. Click on that link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. And if you want to learn more about a lot of the concepts that I was talking about on today's show, go get the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. How to think like a professional DFS player. 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com. I'll see you tomorrow for Grinders Live, but send in your questions and I'll answer them here Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.